Welcome to this episode of the Smart Leaders Sell podcast. I'm Jessica Lorimer, sales coach and leadership expert, and I am really excited to dig down into today's episode. Okay, poddies. So I'm recording this. Sat in a country cottage, I'm going to say country cottage, with the fire on in the background because it's so blooming cold. So if you can hear the odd snap, crackle and pop, Rice Krispies fashion, then it is just the fire. I'm not actually on fire. It's in a grate and it's all doing, swimmingly and keeping me super toasty as I'm recording this with you. So it's kind of an interesting one today. I say interesting and I actually mean interesting as opposed to those days when you'd be in your corporate job and your boss would say, what do you think about the new report? I was going to say weenus because I've been watching way too many Friends reruns recently. That's the downside to Sam being away, is that I just sit and binge watch Netflix in the evening. But anyway, your boss would say, what's the feeling about this new report? And you'd go, yeah, that's really interesting. And in your head, you'd be thinking, yeah, it's really interesting if you have never been to Earth before and you particularly like spreadsheets and you really want to spend every weekend thinking about the numbers that are on it. So not interesting at all. But I was looking around recently and I was looking at the retail market because, as we all know, one of the things about being a sales coach or teaching sales is that you learn to look at the market as a whole and you learn to look at what's going on across multiple industries. And for me, retail is one of those industries that's a really good indicator of how the market is going to play out and what we can expect to see, and also just about economic change and buying habits and the psychology of buyers in the current market. And it's been quite an interesting one. So today, what I want to talk to you about is who we are and how we are what we repeatedly do. And I know that there's a really inspirational Winston Churchill quote that is about success is, a habit, but I can't remember it well enough to paraphrase it off the top of my head. And that's not really where I'm going with this episode. It's not about how, if you are super consistent and you send out emails every week and you do all of the lead generation stuff on the regular, that you're going to be more successful when it comes to sales. Even though you will. But I kind of feel like between me and you, that's a given. If you are already somebody who is running a business and you know that you want to make more sales or you want to generate more leads, consistency is something that you're probably already doing and you already value the importance of. And even if you're not already doing it, you already know that it's important. So we don't need to beat that particular stick today. What I do think is interesting about the concept of you are what you repeatedly do is how that's being reflected in the major retail markets at the moment. So let's dig in. It should be an interesting one. See if you can spot any of these traits in yourself and think about, what you're going to do to spend your time differently over the next few months, because it's an interesting economic climate. And I don't want any of you to get caught out by some of the things that we're seeing shift at the moment. So a couple of weeks ago, actually a few weeks ago now, there was a big ruckus in the UK when one of our favourite department stores announced that they were going into administration. So there's a department store here in the UK called Debenhams, and it announced that it was losing money, hemorrhaging customers, and needed to go into administration. And they've spent the last few weeks looking for a buyer. They've had a couple of different offers and they've announced that they're going to be doing mass store closures and things like that to try and pull themselves out of the situation that they're currently in. But it's a really interesting announcement for me. And there are two reasons. One is that I feel kind of like a fortune teller, because back in, 2012, when we first started recessive periods here in the UK, I remember saying to people, I think these are the stores that are going to go bust. And sure enough, they did. So I don't know that I'm like the harbinger of doom when it comes to retailers and what they may or may not achieve. But, there was definitely some stores for me that I felt would go quite quickly. So the things that were on my original list were things like Carpetright, Toys R Us, HMV, Debenhams, House of Fraser. And people would say to me, don't be ridiculous. Jess. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And I say, no, I really think that these companies are going to go bust. And some of them did in the first recession, and some of them didn't. And some of them, when we hit that second dip for the recession, they then went bust, or they amalgamated with other companies, or they went into administration, they were saved later on. And now we're here, and we're not in an officially recessive period. But the interesting thing about the time period that we're in currently is that we have so much going on that actually everybody is being affected. And it's interesting for me because we're looking at companies who over the year have been what I would call like high street OGs. You know, every single high street in the UK, everyone knows what Debenhams is. We also used to have a shop called Woolworths that everybody loved. And I was particularly fond of Woolworths because they did this pick and mix thing where instead of being a weighted pick and mix, this is probably why Woolworths went bust, just as an FYI. But instead of doing a weighted pick and mix, they used to have this thing you could put whatever you could fit into this cup, as long as the lid fit on the top, you could have it and it would still only cost you $1.99. And I thought that was brilliant. That was the best thing ever because you could get at least £5 worth of sweets into those if you packed them correctly. Again, definitely why they went bust. But we've had all of these high street shops that nobody ever expected that they would be in trouble. And the reality is that over the years, those stores, they became what they repeatedly did. And what they repeatedly did led to their demise in some way or another. So let's run through some of these things that you might want to be avoiding if you're not already. So in the case of Debenhams, Debenhams was, a high street favorite. It did some amazing things in that it managed to bring coherent and cohesive brands under one roof. I'm talking about Debenhams, sorry, like it's dead. It's not. It's not dead. And, I'm sure that they will find a buyer because it has a lot of great points. But Debenhams as a company, they were renowned. They brought cohesive, coherent brands under one roof. They had their own branded stuff and they did quite well as a department store in most areas. They had homeware that was okay. They had menswear, they have women's wear, kids wear, makeup and beauty, and it's fine, right? And it's reasonably priced. As companies go, if we were looking at Debenhams like a supermarket, it's not super cheap. It's not super expensive. It's mid-range. And that was its first problem. Okay, so, we talked about this a few weeks ago on the podcast about pricing. If you price yourself at that mid-range to lower end of the market, a lot of what you're going to have to compete against is price. And when you run a business where you're selling products and your profit margins can only go so tight, actually it becomes really difficult to manage that. But that wasn't the biggest problem for Debenhams. That wasn't the thing that they did most often that, in my opinion, has caused them the most problems so far. In fact, the thing that they have repetitively done that has caused the most damage, in my opinion, is the fact that they discount all of the time. Okay, so every time you walk into a Debenhams, there is some kind of sale going on. It's like they've got this Blue Cross sale, and that happens after major holidays like Christmas and Easter and stuff. And then they'll have seasonal sales where they'll try and get rid of all of the stock that they've brought in from brands, from their own brands, that they haven't managed to sell in the right season. And then they'll have just like random sales, just random things that are going on sale at any time. And unfortunately, what that's done in this particular market is it's trained their audience. Oh, well, eventually they were going to have a sale on it, or they are going to have a sale on it. So guess what? I'll just wait until then. And they've trained their audience into that. And so their audience now are so used to the fact that if they walk into a Debenhams and they don't buy something on week 1, it's probably going to be on sale by week 3. And that's, led to this, I'm imagining, I don't want to speculate about Debenhams' financial figures, but I would imagine that that's led to the squeezing of profit margins consistently in that business. And when your profit margins are already tight and costs generally are going up, we're paying more now for products, we're paying more for materials, we're paying more for rent spaces. Unfortunately, when you repeatedly discount, you can only go so far. You've trained your audience to only want to buy from you at the lowest possible price. And where does that leave your business? So that's the first thing to think about. If you are what you repeatedly do, or in a sales capacity, you are how you repeatedly sell. If you're discounting regularly, are you training your audience not to buy at full price? Are you training them that You're always going to have a deal. You're always going to put a bundle together. You're always going to be creating something that's cheaper than what you're currently offering. And if you are, now is the time to think about it, because in this current climate, you don't want to be caught up in the price war. You know, even if you're not selling products, and I know that some of you will be listening and be like, well, Jess, you know, this doesn't apply to me because I'm selling services. It still does. Still applies to you, because if you're selling services, if you're a web designer or a VA or a graphics designer, and you're looking around and you're thinking, okay, this is interesting. All of my competition have gone from charging, you know, £50 an hour to 20. What are you going to do about that? You know, are you going to look at your audience and say, okay, well, I'm going to maybe change up the people I'm selling to? Are you going to put packages together so that it's less about charging by the hour, which, for the record, I would totally advise. It's always better to charge based on transformation than it is based on an hourly rate. But you've got to really start thinking it's applicable. You know, if you're always discounting, whether it's tarot readings or graphic design or coaching, if you're always discounting those services, people are going to find it very, very difficult to pay full price to you, because you are setting a new baseline, and the new baseline for them in terms of what they expect to pay you is that discounted rate. Now, the other thing we have to look at when it comes to we are how we repeatedly sell is experience. And this is a really interesting one for me. So coming from a background working with luxury brands and working in high-end consultative selling for a long time, it amazes me how little people take into account, how little they value experience anymore. And it's really interesting, because one of the things that I learned working for some awesome companies and working with some incredible people over the years was that experience is everything. People will forgive most things if they get a great experience. So they will forgive higher price tags. They will forgive, you know, the odd email going unanswered if they get an amazing experience when it counts. And this is an interesting perspective. When we look at the high street, one of the things that's happened over the years is that companies, because they've been squeezed on profit margins and rental costs and product costs, they've kind of lost some of the experience that they once provided. And a great example of a company who still has this amazing experience is John Lewis. And again, John Lewis in the UK, they're a department store just like Debenhams, only the experience is totally different. And that's why, or it's one of the main reasons that they've survived and that they are perhaps not thriving, right? They've just announced their first loss quarter in a long time. But in terms of the high street, they're doing well. They're maintaining. They are, you know, continuing to get customers in. They're not the lowest price department store. They are one of the premiums. They are the place that you go. We used to joke about it when I was at university. You know, if you were like me and your parents were kind of normal, you would probably go to, I don't know, Wilkinson's and buy your university stuff. You get like your plates. And I think the deal I had on my university plates was, I think I paid £5. And I got like 20 plates, you know, bowls, plates, big plates. And I remember when, even when Sam and I first moved in together, I still had them. I'd paid £5, like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years earlier. And I still had these plates and they were fantastic. I think even now we still have some in the cupboard. So if you're somebody who ever comes to my house and there are more than 6 people there and we have to use old plates and nice plates, you're probably going to get something from Wilkinson's from like 10 years ago. 12 years ago. Oh God, I'm so old now. But it's that kind of thing. So John Lewis are your premium brands. And when we were all off to university, the kids who came and they'd kitted out their rooms from John Lewis, they'd use really nice bedding, they had nice cutlery. They were kids that we knew probably came from quite a well-to-do background, because those things are not inexpensive at John Lewis. You know, don't get me wrong, they don't sell gold-plated cutlery, but it's good quality, it lasts. And that's how they've built their business on, again, being a department store, but being recognizable for having good brands and providing an excellent customer experience. So what do I mean by that? The thing is, when you go into John Lewis, it's a very different experience to when you go into other department stores. And Sam and I recently bought a TV. I think I talked about this on the podcast just before Christmas, but we bought a TV and we were spending a fair amount of money on it and we didn't really know what we wanted. Sam had obviously been on the internet and done that thing that men do, you know, where you guys are so organized. when it comes to research for tech products. You know, been on there and he's like, do I want QLED or OLED? And which brand do I want? And of course we had to have Samsung because Sam loves Samsung. I don't know whether it's because they have Sam in the name or I don't know. I'm not particularly fussy, but fine, we went for a Samsung in the end. And when we were deciding on where we could go, we had a couple of options. We could either go to our local Currys, you know, they sell electrical goods, and that would have been fine. Or we could go to John Lewis, which has a smaller selection of televisions, arguably, but we prefer the experience there. So off we trot to John Lewis, and, you know, we're standing in the television department, and this guy comes up to us and he says, you know, do you need any help? And Sam hates being sold to. Sam hates salespeople. I'm not really sure how we're still together. But Sam hates salespeople. And so in his kind of like nervous, you know, oh my God, they're going to start selling to me way, he's like legged it down an aisle. He's like, no, please don't come near me. Don't talk to me. Don't make me look into your eyes, you hypnotic chap. And the guy's name was Neil. Now, we bought our television, I'm going to say a good 6 months ago. And I still remember that this man's name was Neil. So anyway, Sam does his usual running away thing. And about, I don't know, 15 minutes later, when I'm starting to look bored and, you know, in that mode of, I don't really care, like, let's just buy one and leave, please, God. He comes back over and he says to Sam, I've noticed that you're looking at the OLED TVs. That's really interesting because OLED's really popular at the moment. But actually, I think that the QLED are going to overtake that in the next few years. And Sam is wowed. He's like, oh my goodness, this guy loves TVs as much as I do after researching them for the last 3 weeks. And they start up this conversation. And honest to goodness, it's like technical chat that I don't care about and that I'm not interested in. And I wandered off for about 20 minutes looking at other things. But when I came back, Sam was like, I really want this TV. And he'd made the decision. He wanted a specific television and he wanted to buy it from Neil because Neil had had this conversation with him. And it turns out that they didn't actually have our TV in stock. And Sam was gutted. And he was like, I'm so torn because I really want to take the TV home tonight, but also I really want Neil to get the commission. In the end, we did buy the TV from elsewhere because lovely Neil, the lovely sales guy, said, don't worry about it. We don't have the TV, you know, get that from somewhere else if you really want it tonight, but we have the sound bar that you want. And so he ended up selling us an £800 sound bar that we hadn't gone in for. So here's the thing. Experience is huge for customers. And when you have a good experience from somewhere, it will outweigh a premium price point. We tend to feel like if we're going to get a good experience, we'll pay more. Michelin-starred restaurants, it's one of the reasons that they don't go bust all that often because they're not just selling good food. They're selling an experience. For a whole evening, you get to go and you can pretend that you are David and Victoria Beckham if that's what you want to do. And you can feel really special and you can, you know, celebrate an awesome occasion and feel really good. Whereas when you go down to your local, I don't know, kebab shop, they probably don't make you feel great about buying it. They, you know, you probably don't walk in and somebody collects your coat and they're so excited to see you and they call you by name and they offer you the wine list. They're probably more like, hey, look, you're spending £3 on some lamb meat. Would you like a bag with that? And we like to have experiences. We like to feel like we matter, like we're not just a number. There was actually a great talk on Goalcast the other day, a video, and I can't remember who it was. It was a chap called Ryan Etis. Maybe somebody can email in and let me know. But he said that he was in an airport, Minneapolis airport, over on Christmas Eve, and he was waiting to fly home to his family in Cleveland. He'd had a really bad day. His mum had called him a couple of months earlier and told him that his dad was quite ill. It was a terminal diagnosis. And he was feeling a bit crap about being in an airport on Christmas Eve. But he met this woman who was serving coffee behind a coffee counter. And apparently she had this great conversation and she made him feel really awesome because she asked questions. She cared. What are you going home for? When are you going? Like, what are you going to do? And when he walked away from her, he realized that actually he wanted to ask her this question. He goes back to her and he says, you know, it's Christmas Eve and you probably don't want to be here either, but like, how can you be so happy on Christmas Eve working and cheer all these people up when you're just pouring coffee? And she looked at him and she said, I'm not pouring coffee, I'm pouring happiness. And I thought, that's exactly it. That's the whole point behind sales experiences. And it's not about throwing in tons of bonuses. It's not about, you know, let's give people more stuff and then they'll be happier. It's about what is the experience when somebody buys from you? Do they feel good? Does it make them happy to buy? Do they want to buy more? One of the things that I'm proudest of when people join the Dotties, for example, is that we have an onboarding sequence, and we spent a lot of time working on it. And it's designed to make people feel good about joining the community immediately. So what happens is people sign up, and the first email they get is, yay, here's your login to the portal. Come and join the Facebook group. And in the Facebook group, on the Wednesday after you join, you'll be in the Wednesday welcome thread. And so every Wednesday, we have a welcome thread for new members, and we tell everybody who the new members are, and everybody comes in and says hello, and it's like party atmosphere, and you feel immediately integrated, and it's really nice. And then over the next few days, people get emails that say, hey, look, here's how best to use the Dotties. Here's how you can book in like your calls. Here's when the hot seats are. And we even have, you know, the opportunity for them to buy like discounted planners and stuff like that. And we send that out too. And we always get feedback that people really enjoy joining because they immediately feel like they're part of it. The interesting thing as well is that we put time and effort into the onboarding sequence. And like I say, we do offer things like discounted planners and stuff like that in that welcome sequence. We're very transparent. Hey, look, you join the Dotties, you get Dottie discount and stuff that nobody else does. And we increase the average transaction value, because normally it would be, you know, £45 a month or £450 a year. And instead, you know, if we add in those discounted products, that we make people understand you don't have to buy these. And, you know, you're already a member, you get a ton of other cool stuff. But if you want to supplement your learning with a planner or with a physical product, then you can, and you get a discount. We increase the average transaction value from being £45 to £60. And that's a big difference. It's a big jump, you know. So think about your experience. Think about, what is it that you're doing? How are you onboarding new customers? Are you making them feel really good? I had an experience last year. I hired a company to help with an element of web design, and it was really frustrating. I joined up, I paid the money, and I waited and waited and waited and waited. And they just didn't ever come back to us. Like, they didn't come back on timely emails. They didn't send us an onboarding email and tell us how it was supposed to work. They didn't explain what they were doing. They never sent us any reports. And 2 months later, I cancelled, and I sent them a cancellation explaining, I just don't know what it is that you're doing for my company, and we don't seem to be able to get any response. And so we cancelled the subscription. Not only did we cancel the subscription, but because we'd had such a bad experience, the company owner actually sent us some chocolates to apologize. And I didn't want chocolates. I just wanted somebody to come back and be like, oh my goodness, I'm really sorry you've had this. Let's do better for you. But instead they lost a customer and then had to pay to send me sweets. You know, so it's important. Experience is important. We want people to feel good when they're coming into contact with us. And again, it's one of those things that if you are how you repeatedly sell, if you sell in a way that makes people feel good, that makes them want to bring other people into that experience, then you're never going to lose word of mouth referrals. You're always going to have somebody who's able to say, oh my goodness, I have a friend who would be perfect for your membership. I have a friend who'd be perfect for your course. And they will refer them safe in the knowledge and totally happily, even if you're not paying an affiliate fee, because they know they're going to get an awesome experience. And that's really important. Okay. When we're looking at sales as a habit, and when we're looking at what we do regularly, yes, it's about consistency, and yes, it's about looking at your lead generation and monitoring your metrics and, you know, actively selling every day. But also it's about what you're training your customers to expect. Are you training them to expect a good experience? Are you training them to expect discounts? Are you training them to expect that you're going to be accessible 24 hours a day? You know, because boundaries are another big thing. It's interesting for me. One of the most interesting company case studies that I've ever seen is United Airlines. They have this huge policy, which I love, where they back their staff to the hilt and they believe in their staff. And so the interesting thing about United, and I don't know how much you guys know about their company history, but the interesting thing about United as a company is that they went through a period of doing really, really badly. And they got a new CEO and he took over, and, you know, they found that their staff weren't massively engaged with the company anymore. People would show up late. They weren't motivated. They just weren't happy. And so they weren't getting the results that the company wanted. And this guy came in and he put a lot in place not just incentives and things for staff, but also clear boundaries on what was acceptable behavior and what would always be backed up by the company in terms of, things like dealing with passengers, but also what would not be. And as a company, they've had some rough rides over the years, but they've succeeded again because they have clear boundaries. That's one of the things that's made them most successful, not just with their staff, but also with their customers. So again, it's something to take into consideration in your sales process. Are you setting clear boundaries? If you're going out there and you're directly messaging people on Facebook and being like, hey, yeah, do you want to buy this thing? Or it's one of my bugbears. People always jump into my Facebook inbox and they're like, oh my goodness, you have a dog, I have a dog, let's talk. And that they're trying to pitch you something. But if you do that, if that's your sales process, if that's what you repeatedly do, how do you think your customers are going to contact you when something goes wrong? Or when they want to, get an answer from you immediately? They're going to jump straight into Facebook. They're going to be like, I want to message you directly right now, because that's the expectation that you've set. So if there are things in your business, in your sales process, well, not in your sales process, but if there are things in your business that maybe irritate you a bit right now, maybe you're like, oh, why are they so cheap? I hear that one a lot, right? Why do my audience only want things for free? Why do my audience always want to, talk to me every second of every day? Rather than looking at them and thinking, oh my goodness, you're all cretins, start looking at you. What are you repeatedly doing that could be encouraging that behavior? And what can you do to change it? Now, this doesn't mean, just as a caveat, that if you have the odd client who is a complete nightmare, that's anything to do with you. Sometimes people are just trolls, okay? That is just a thing. But if you are experiencing a difficulty with selling at a certain price point, or you're finding it hard to train your clients into appropriate boundaries, or you are finding that actually people reach out to you quite often and tell you, awful things, then it could be worth looking at what you repeatedly do in your sales process. Where in your sales process are you encouraging these things? And can you now change them? And the answer is yes, you can always change them. So hopefully that has inspired you to have a look what's going on in retailers by you. What is going down? Are they always discounting? Are food chains closing? Are they, losing customers? And if they are, look at the reasons why. Look at what is actually going on. And then make sure that you take those lessons and apply them to your own business. Do not get caught out in this economic climate, because you really, really don't need to. You can absolutely make it through. I will be seeing you on Friday. I've got a really good friend of mine on the show on Friday, which I'm very excited about. I'm very excited to bring her on and have a really interesting conversation about burning out. So if you're somebody who is thinking, oh my goodness, selling, running a business, marketing, doing everything by myself, I feel like I'm burning out, or I feel like I'm at risk of burning out, make sure you tune in on the Friday episode. I will see you then. Have an awesome week.